This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 757, recorded on Wednesday, February 5th, 2020. Life on Earth. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight we will fill your head with a clap, a school, and violence. But first, thanks to the Burroughs Welcome Fund and our Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer. As a novel pneumonia-inducing virus races around the world, outpacing confinement efforts, as governments, media markets, and healthcare workers react, as the number of infected continue to grow, and as scientists work overtime to construct a vaccine, something to keep in mind. It is well within our power to deal with this emergency, as with many other potential threats to human health, through the ongoing investments we have made in education, research, and our public health systems. Without the public investment, we would be unprepared to identify that an outbreak was even occurring. Without the public investment, we would be unprepared to discover the source of the outbreak. Without the public investment, we would be unprepared to react quickly and in an effective manner. Without the public investment, we would be unprepared to survive this and many more lethal events. We are in this together, this world, this life, this experiment called humanity. And in a very direct way, nothing makes this more clear than a pandemic that can cross all borders we set between us. That and This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and to you, our listener out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again to talk about all the science that we found this week that we're excited about and that piqued our interest, made us ask more questions. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, I have stories about biodiversity. Got a couple of stories about life on Earth, hence the title of the show. I've also got some bees. Got some bees in the house and cats. We're going to talk about cats.
Oh.
That's going to happen. Yeah. Justin, what'd you bring?
I've got homeless schooling, violent evolution, and coronavirus update.
All right. As is good, we should keep updating that story as it is ongoing for people, and the science is ongoing too. Blair, what is in the animal corner?
I have clapping seals.
Oh, the clap.
Yep. The
Okay.
seal clapping. Yes.
Okay.
I have foodie cuttlefish, and I have some spider glue. Always nice to talk about some spider glue.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I was expecting you were going to say. Spider glue. What about, what? Spider webs, but not glue.
The glue.
Okay.
The glue that makes them the web sticky?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll find out.
We will find out.
There's time, Kiki. Well, we can get there.
We'll get there. I know. Okay. I hope that you can wait. I can wait. We can wait. As we jump into the show, though, I would like you to know that next week, we will not be broadcasting live on Wednesday night because we will be doing 2 live shows at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, that's AAAS, meeting in Seattle, Washington. First on Friday.
That's what that stands for.
Yeah, one on Friday at 12:30 p.m., another on Saturday the 15th at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. We will try to broadcast those, but the episodes will be published as podcast episodes. The shows will be published as podcast episodes for those of you who who listen to the podcast. You can tell your friends to subscribe to TWIS, to get that podcast on iTunes, the Google Play podcast portal, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, Pandora, TuneIn, all the good places for podcasts. You can also tell them to find us on YouTube and Facebook by searching for This Week in Science or just visiting twis.org. But now it's time for the science. Let's talk about biodiversity.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, this story I thought was really very interesting. It's out of the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which
Mbari.
Yes, the Monterey Bay Aquarium. The researchers have come together with many other researchers, national governmental organizations around the world to create a very global interdisciplinary attempt at understanding biodiversity around the world. So what they came to understand is that there are people who work on life on land, and there are people who work on ocean life, but they don't talk to each other very much. And so you have this distribution of animal life that is set to these disparate quadrants, when in fact there is a lot of overlap, and there are environmental factors that come from land and influence biodiversity in the ocean. There are factors from the ocean that influence biodiversity on land, and the researchers decided they needed to come together to map out the diversity of life, the biodiversity of our planet terrestrially and in the marine ecosystems, to figure out where life is and what allows it to be there. It's a pretty interesting question and a laudable goal, to be sure. And so they looked at around 67,000 species of animals around the world to be able to get a picture of where these animals were, during what times of year, why they were there, what was going on, what factors were involved in their distribution. And they used artificial intelligence and natural learning models to come to predict where, based on what they saw in the various species, try and predict and tease out the factors that would tell them where species should be. And a lot of the times the models were quite right. However, a few times they determined that the models were very wrong in predicting lots of species, where in fact there are not lots of species, where there's not a lot of biodiversity. And so in doing this, it's telling them what they're getting right and understanding about what allows life to exist in certain places and what doesn't allow it to exist in others. They determined that there are ecological mechanisms like geographic isolation and structural complexity. So, for instance, a more complex sea bottom, whether it's flat and there's nothing on it, versus lots of coral and lots of rocks and things that are on the bottom of the ocean that make it a very structurally complex ecosystem. They can explain residuals in the models and also identify regions and processes that might deserve more attention later at the global scale. And what they eventually want to be able to do is improve their models and improve their estimates so that they will be able to take the changing climate and predict where animals are going to be in the future, and not just predict where they're going to be so that we can fish them or we can hunt them, but so that we can create plans of action for actually potentially conserving them and being good stewards for all the life on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, we have these things called national parks and preserves and things like that on land. In the ocean, we have marine protected areas, but the amount of oceans that are protected are way less than the amount of lands that are protected by percentage. And so I think that finding kind of the common ground between those two areas is super important. I also think it's interesting looking at that figure that there was expected richness where there wasn't, and I'm just so curious based on their data what time frame their data is from, and if perhaps that is an area where there was species richness and we dumped a bunch of chemicals in the water or overfished in that area or have a huge amount of noise pollute. You know, there's like a million things that could be happening in those spaces, because those middle areas of the planet are also where there's a lot of humans.
Yeah.
So, you know, all these places where there's a lot of biodiversity, there's also humans in those spaces. So we're part of that equation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good observation.
Yeah. I also wonder, not just us, but then we also know like there's the big dead zone off the coast of Oregon that keeps coming back, Oregon and California, the hypoxic or anoxic, where the oxygen just gets depleted. If areas like that are taken into account into this. Yeah, but they looked at a number of species ranges that were published. According to the paper here, it looks as though they were looking at distribution of birds, amphibians, and mammals from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature and BirdLife International. They've also queried the Ocean Biogeographic Information System, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, FishBase, the Jellyfish Database Initiative, and the International Union for the Conservation of the Nature for Fish. Yeah, so it looks as though they've just been looking at distribution and potentially not taken... And that's going to have been, all that data will have been collected over a variety of timescales. So changes absolutely may have taken place. Yeah, but those are very interesting questions. And from that study of this new goal of kind of looking at the Earth in a holistic manner and not just, like you said, looking at, hey, we have preserves. We've got this area we're preserved and it's great. Life in there is fantastic. Looking at it as, oh my gosh, we have preserves, but sometimes animals leave those areas. And what happens then, right? How do we start looking at the systems and not just these smaller puzzle pieces within them? And in doing that, there is an instrument that was launched to the International Space Station in June 2018. It is called EcoStress. This stands for Ecosystem Spaceborne Thermal Radiometer on Space Station. And EcoStress is super cool because what it looks at is transpiration, evapotranspirations, where plants, as they wake up in the morning, they have these pores in their surfaces that open, and as they start photosynthesizing, taking in carbon dioxide, giving off carbon dioxide, the gas exchange is this evaporation transpiration process, evapotranspiration. And so they've looked at the same place at multiple times during the day because the orbit of the space station is such that allows the space station goes around the planet multiple times every day. And in doing that, it can look at the same locations, yet at different times of the day. And when it is looking at these different times of the day, it can see how the plants are breathing and how they are acting during the day from space. This is just brilliant. What they have found during this process, there's also water loss. The evapotranspiration leads to plant sweating. Is another aspect of that the instrument is able to analyze. And they looked at morning data for the summer season, and they found that near the Great Lakes, near Lake Superior, plants near the water woke up first in the mornings. Yeah. They have put the images that they've taken from the multiple measurements on top of each other to be able to show how plants change their activity in this one particular area over the day. Plants that are closer to the lake are in a red color, and then there's another green color and a blue color in this image. And what it is indicating is the colors are not indicating different amounts of activity, but different times of activity. And so it's almost as if there's a wave of plant awareness of the environment that takes place from the shore of the lake further into land. Now the question is, why does that happen? Does it have to do with, is it lake heating or cooling effects that would keep that area cooler or give the plants different activity? I don't know.
Yeah,
Kevin,
are they reacting to something else in their environment that's being activated?
So eco-stress, it's a cool instrument that's allowing us to see the planet breathing, in effect, these plants waking up as the sun comes around. Yeah. The main questions that eco-stress is trying to address are, how is the terrestrial biosphere responding to changes in water availability? How do changes in diurnal vegetation water stress impact the global carbon cycle? And can agricultural vulnerability be reduced through advanced monitoring of agricultural water consumptive use and improved drought estimation? So I think that'll also be a very interesting aspect of this instrument, is being able to tell us a lot more about agriculture, not just wild plants, but agriculture and drought influences. That's, I think, going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. All these eyes from space, I think that they're giving us such an amazing new view of our planet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Love it.
I love it too. Justin, do you have a story?
Yeah, this is a representative survey of undergraduate and graduate students at North Carolina State University. They took, it's a campus of 36,000, but they had 1,923 students participate in the study. And they found that almost 10% of the students had experienced homelessness in the previous year, and that more than 14% dealt with food insecurity in the previous month to taking the survey. This is quoting Mary Haskett, professor of psychology at North Carolina State, who was the first author of the study. We knew that our student body was facing these challenges, and that understanding the scope of the problems is a first step towards addressing them. Researchers found 9.6% of survey respondents reported experiencing episodes of homelessness in the previous year, which could have been the meaning that they had placed to that could have been as little as one night of not having any place to sleep. And then the 14.8% that said they were food insecure in the previous month is actually something that is got a scale, technically termed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And there's a 10-item inventory within this survey for food insecurity, which to the questions on there, they do an overall calculation of the 10 to come up with the 14.8% as being labeled food insecure. So, for example, to the questions, 20.6% of students were worried about not being able to afford food, at least some of the time, while 9.9% of the students had actually gone hungry because they could not afford food. Quoting, it's a tricky thing. Place these numbers in context nationally, because while there have been efforts in the nonprofit sector to collect this data on college students and homelessness and food insecurity, there has not been much peer-reviewed research that has actually been published, says Haskett. The survey has helped make a difference at North Carolina State. The survey data provided an impetus for the university to launch several new programs, including small grants and meal swipes, which I'm assuming is something to do with their cafeteria, to assist students with emergency food needs. So it's kind of a horrible story. You know, part of it is we know that students go into pretty extreme debt these days at American campuses. And I'm wondering if these are students who just ran out of the ability to borrow, or ran through what they've been borrowing already or weren't able to borrow. But it is just sort of a sad state of affairs that we have a nation that is not investing in the future generation of students and allowing this sort of situation to develop. Hopefully the study gets more attention, more universities hopefully look at this. One of the side notes is they said that they thought it was unusual for a state university to have these high levels, but they acknowledged that in the community college level, this was common. This would not have been a surprising result. And in fact, it may have been a lower result than what you might expect to get. But it's an understudied issue, which is kind of interesting because you would think at a university setting, there's room to study just about anything that somebody would want to take up. And this sounds like it could be a pretty important thing.
It sounds like it's an incredibly important issue. And you hear stories about grad students living in their cars or, people living underneath their desks in the lab or doing whatever they can to make ends meet. And the truth of it is not everybody gets grants, scholarships, loans. They, either for the grants and the scholarships, they don't. They're highly competitive and potentially
you don't
they
get
just
them
don't
every
get them.
year too. Yeah. Just because you
Yeah.
get them one year doesn't mean you get them the next year. So you could enroll in a
Right.
school having gotten some scholarships and not be guaranteed that you'll have them the next year. I remember specifically being surprised at how much books cost and the fact that those are not covered by scholarships unless you specifically got a scholarship for books. And so I could totally see having to buy a $200 textbook and suddenly losing your food budget for the month. That makes perfect sense to me.
It makes perfect sense that this happens, but of course,
Yes.
it doesn't make perfect sense that it happens
No.
in a global
No.
superpower with the
No.
financial
Right.
resources that
No.
this nation has. So this is obviously
Right.
a problem. I mean, and when I look at something like this, the first thing that occurs to me is, what's the alternative? What's the alternative world that we are building where we're pushing people away from higher education, where we're making it this prohibitive that the less and less people can afford to safely and securely gain an education? Because for all of these studies, for all of the people in this study, this 10% who were homeless and the 15% that were having food insecurity, how many people say, yeah, not worth it? Not this year, not this time around.
I get it. I went to a state school, so I went to one of the cheapest colleges I could possibly go to for my bachelor's degree. I had a part-time job. I got scholarships. I got loans, and my parents got loans, and it took me 10 years to pay that off. Mm-hmm. And that was the cheapest possible school I could go to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I get it. That's
And if you don't want,
it's a struggle.
And if you don't want to go into debt, then you make choices not to, or perhaps maybe your money is going other places. Maybe you have medical bills that your family's having to pay, and they can't afford, and maybe according to everybody, they make enough money and so don't qualify for the lower interest loans or for, there's so many factors that go into it. And you're right, Justin, how many people decide, how many are completely turned away and don't go through that at all. I'm sure just about everyone knows of people or has, either or been that person who's struggled through a quarter or semester of school because they were trying to make ends meet so that they could do something that would give them a leg up in their future career. This is definitely something that needs to be studied. It's something that, there are these movements to make education free for states to provide higher education free of charge to people. And if you didn't have to pay tuition, if you didn't have to, or if it were easier to get money for books, perhaps it would make it easier for more people to be able to make that choice and to step into higher education. and not be pushed away.
Yeah. I mean, there's a real weird thing going on where the amount that the cost of college has raised in the past several decades in
gone up so
relation
high.
to the percentage that pay has gone up is so out of whack.
Unrelated. Well, and the same can be said for housing. It's
totally.
It's also one of my fears I'm all for the proposals that are out there that create funds to pay for higher education, to take it off the debt burden, to take it out of the hands of the banks and make it something we do collectively as a society. Totally for it. The one concern I have is I've already noticed that college towns tend to have much more expensive housing than other places, because as you have people who are going to be coming in and renting and want to be close to facilities because they may not have vehicles and everything.
Turnover,
yeah. So it's one of those. The first thing that one of the candidates, name people, but is proposing also a flat fund that everybody gets. And the first thing I think is that rent will just go up that much.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody who's paying rent, their rent will just go up by the amount of this subsidy. So it has to be a housing thing too. I mean, I know this is going off a little bit too far on this, but the UC Davis, behind UC Davis, an area that the campus has expanded into, they've massively expanded with student-run housing, because the city of Davis, the housing here has become prohibitively expensive, whether you're working full-time or not. Yeah. And so they've been trying to tackle this issue themselves by creating a huge amount of housing for their students. But it does take the actual communities like this university that's creating a food program for it. It's going to take the universities themselves to identify that they need to take better care of their main client, which is these students. That they can utilize some of their resources to further the security, health, and housing of their own students. As a society, I think we should all be involved, but I think on the campus level, there could be maybe a smaller football stadium next time around, and a little bit more affordable housing for your students. Just saying.
Just think about it. Just think about it a little bit more. That's right. You're listening to This Week in Science. And if you're interested in a TWIS shirt or mug or other item of TWIS merchandise, head over to twis.org and click on the Zazzle link to browse our store. Do you know what time it is right now?
What time is it?
Speaking of horses, it's time for Blair's Animal Corner.
I like that part of the show.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
Oh my goodness. I have two of the most amazing stories. This is a great week for animal science, I gotta say. First, how would either of you, as a human, try to communicate with another human? I am strong, stay away, or I am strong, my genes are good. Would it be the same thing? Would it be different things?
It would be different. One sounds more, I think one is much more yelly than the other one.
Yeah, so one is yelly, the other is, I don't know, maybe more sensual. Well, if you're a gray seal, they both might be the same. And they might be clapping.
Well, I guess if you've got one move.
Yeah, that's your one move.
Use it for everything.
This is a new study actually finding that seals can clap underwater. Which, next time you're in a swimming pool, go ahead and try that real quick.
I have tried it. It's not easy. The water gets in between your hands and you're like, I'm going to push the water out of the way.
And matter in the way. Absolutely. Yeah. This was captured in footage, which took 17 years of diving to catch. And this researcher, naturalist Dr. Ben Burville, a researcher with Newcastle University in the UK, caught a male gray seal clapping its paw, and it sounded like a gunshot-like crack. Really just sounds kind of like a loud clap. And so this raises many questions. The first one being, as we were just talking about, how do you make a loud clap sound underwater when you have no air to compress between the flippers? You have all that water in the way. It is, we're not sure exactly how they do it. I guess they're just very strong and very effective at it. More study is needed for that in particularly. But these loud clapping sounds cut through the background noise underwater and send a clear signal to other seals in the area. So they think this is like a chest beating of a male gorilla, which is the I am strong, stay away, or I am strong, my genes are good. So saying both, I am a dominant male, other males, get out of it. Laters, here I am. So it appears that this clapping could be important social behavior, which also means that if there is noise pollution, that could be a problem.
Yeah, getting away.
Yes.
I like the idea too that the clapping could make him like if it's anthropomorphic, that it's clapping like applause, and that it's your opponents are like, oh well, you know what, thank you. I guess I won't fight you. You're paying me a nice compliment. And then to anybody else, to anyone you're trying to attract, it's like, oh, they think I'm funny. Or I think I'm good at this. Oh, okay. I like that.
Oh, yes. Oh, keep at it. Oh,
yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But instead,
yes. Yeah.
Instead, it sounds a little bit different.
Wow.
Good clap. Do it again. Yeah. Yeah. Clap, clap.
Clap, clap, clap. Clap, clap.
So is this something that maybe you already said it? Is this something specifically males are doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, it's only been caught on film, I think, this one time so far, but it just seems very deliberate, and other seals were responding to it. So the other thing that's interesting about this is that for over 100 years, seals in circuses and in zoos have been trained to clap, which is interesting because I think humans, their own hubris this whole time, have assumed that we taught them to do that. But this kind of leads us to believe that perhaps this is a behavior that kind of already exists, which animal training in general, it's so much easier when the behavior already kind of exists.
And you're just reinforcing it for some.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was this evening, I was trying to teach my puppy to shake, and it's really hard to get that behavior for the first time, but she also likes to bat at things with her paws. So I had to try to elicit that behavior. And if I could elicit that behavior, then it's much easier for her to go, oh, when she does this hand signal, she wants my hand, because she's offering it up on her own. Me shaping that behavior from scratch is really, really difficult unless you can build on something that already exists. So seals doing this in the wild actually makes perfect sense for how people could train seals to clap so easily for so long. Because also we have to remember that about 100 years ago, our understanding of how to train animals was so out of whack with what we understand now, that being able to do it so successfully and consistently, there's a good chance something there is a vestige from wild behavior. So it makes perfect sense to me. But it is interesting that it took 17 years to catch this. It's possible that seeing humans around, the seals aren't doing it because there's another element. They're not worried about the other seals around. And it's possible that this guy, having spent 17 years diving, maybe a particular group of seals is like, oh, yeah, that's just our buddy.
We know
like,
him. That's
oh,
great.
Dr.
Yeah.
Ben. Yeah, he's just hanging out. But this is a good reminder that if we don't know a behavior exists, we can't protect it. And so before we knew that seals were using this behavior to communicate, we wouldn't know that it's something that we'd have to be careful about with noise pollution. But we do know that marine mammals in general use sound signals. They call. So it's not that too hard to believe. But
Yeah. I can make your hands clap.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
I'm so hip. So next, I have my favorite story of the week about cuttlefish.
Cuddle, as in you want to cuddle them.
Cuttlefish.
I know.
These are the amazing magicians of camouflage or
Yes, and
environment
they can-
adaptation
And they can solve puzzles and recognize patterns and do deduction, and they're just so special. Well, there's something new that we can add to that kind of resume of how cuttlefish are amazing. And it is that they have a capacity that I often lack, which is the ability to make decisions based on future expectations, such as eating less for lunch when you know there's a fancy dinner coming.
Oh, I have problems with that.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, there's a fancy dinner coming. Why did I go to the Chinese buffet for lunch?
Researchers tested 29 cuttlefish 5 times a day for 5 days to find their favorite food. They offered crab, they offered shrimp, they had them at equal distances and watched what they went for first. And all cuttlefish love shrimps. They love their shrimps. And so after knowing that, they were able to test cuttlefish's ability to recognize certain patterns in what food was offered to them. So when researchers reliably provided shrimp in the evening, cuttlefish were much more selective during the day and ate significantly fewer, and I read this wrong the first time I read it. I read they ate significantly fewer carbs. If only I could do that. No. They ate significantly fewer crabs. So they were like, oh, I'm skipping the crab for lunch because I want to eat that shrimp later. I'm going to save up. When they were provided with shrimp on a random basis, the cuttlefish would become opportunistic and eat more crabs, not carbs, during the day. So they were able to remember patterns of food availability and therefore optimize foraging activity to guarantee not only that the volume of food that they were eating was enough, but that they could eat more of the foods they prefer. So this flexible foraging strategy shows that cuttlefish can adapt quickly to changes in their environment and the availability of food in their environment using previous experience. They can build on that. And this shows valuable insight into the evolutionary origins of complex cognitive ability. As we often say with the cephalopods, is that if they have these very complex problem-solving skills, there's a good chance there is a common ancestor that shared that. And cephalopods and vertebrates diverged around 550 million years ago. So if we are going with that theory, that is some old knowledge. Now, I'm not so sure about that because also other vertebrates are definitely not as smart as cuttlefish. So I also am willing to think that perhaps they are super smart in a convergent evolution pathway where they're just really good at similar stuff to higher vertebrates because they both have evolved as the smarties in their habitat.
Yeah.
There's definitely a natural selection advantage to being smart.
I'm
definitely
just
a survival
thinking,
edge to it.
I just kind of had an interesting thought. So we were talking earlier about biodiversity and comparing biodiversity on land in terrestrial environments versus in aquatic environments in the water. And I was thinking about the evolution of hominids and how they were kind of this quote unquote higher intelligence pathway that we got in terrestrial habitats. What if cephalopods were the mirror image for the aquatic environment? So because there were so many invertebrates in that first kind of radiation of evolution of all the invertebrates, of all the starfish and jellyfish and octopuses and all this kind of stuff that just exploded, right? So that was this huge explosion of species in the oceans. What if the cuttlefish and the octopus and the squid are this arm of evolutionary history in oceans that are this kind of terminus of like the smartest and most evolved? It's possible, right?
It's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, as
possible.
Justin
I
often
mean-
says, we're all the same evolved, right, in terms of time. But
I mean, the
Yeah,
mammals.
We all had as much time to get here.
Yeah. I mean, the mammals are still pretty smart in the ocean.
right,
you
but they
know,
started on land and then went
then
back, to the ocean.
Right.
So-
but these are just the animals who
Mhm.
stayed, the inverts who stayed in the water.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just-
an interesting question. But I mean, this study is very interesting. And I'm noting that one of the authors on the paper is my advisor from my PhD.
That's
she is
fun.
she's the co-senior PI on the paper, Nicola Clayton. And we did studies. I was involved in helping her as a lab tech and as a graduate student, helping her do very similar studies with scrub jays. And we were looking at the idea of episodic memory and this question of whether birds could remember specific time, place, cues, and contexts to be able to, pretty much answer the question of who, what, the questions of who, what, when, where, and why, these episodes in their lives. And the initial experiments that we did were very similar to this, just looking at preferences for waxworms versus kibble dog food and changing the availability from different times of the day. And the birds acted very similarly, where they changed the way they consumed because they had this, because what this shows is it's not just selective foraging behavior, it's also time dependent. It's also an awareness that there is time. And so there is memory involved, and there's an understanding by what we would call what we would consider a very simplistic invertebrate, right? Mm-hmm. An understanding that there is a later, that there is a will be.
Well, this is like the marshmallow test that we've done, right? I'll give you one marshmallow now or two marshmallows in 10 minutes. And so many small humans cannot handle it.
Yeah. Well, actually, so the thing there, though, of course, is more the history of the child is more important than even age. What it really comes down to in the one on humans is whether or not they come from a household that is more or less affluent.
Right, at a certain age,
but earlier,
at a certain age,
when you do it with a 2-year-old, they pretty much always fail. But when you 3, 4, 5, they start to develop these other things. But I just more meant that this is a similar kind of delayed gratification experiment model.
It is that you are going to get yummy shrimps later if you don't eat the crab now. Keep your stomach ready to eat all those shrimps. And they did. Yeah. But anyway, this is it's very complex cognitive behavior for an otherwise simple organism. Like you're saying, Blair, are they that simple?
Yeah, not
That
a
is
lot
the
simple about a
question,
cuttlefish.
really.
I think it really comes down to, has this cognitive ability lasted for 550 million years, or did it develop convergently? And if so, why?
Yeah.
Why do cephalopods have this amazing cognitive ability that other animals do not? Fascinating.
And is this, and if you can answer that question, is this something that will tell us about the evolution of this behavior in other species, or is it telling us something about the process of cognition developing over evolutionary time generally in a semi-social species?
Yeah. And then for fun, you can just
Interesting
picture a
stuff.
cuttlefish going, "Oh, I'm too full. I can't finish the shrimp," which also just tickles me. This shrimp is too much.
There's a fun video going around of a cuttlefish pretending to be a hermit crab.
Oh, really?
And it's great. And it holds its shape and its color looks like a hermit crab until another quote unquote hermit crab comes up. And then they both realize that they're not hermit crabs and they both turn into cuttlefish and they like start color matching each other. And it's really cute.
Oh my gosh, I'm watching it. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Wow.
It's a hermit crab.
Such
No, I'm not.
amazing
I'm a
creatures.
cuttlefish. That's right.
Oh,
Okay, everyone. I think it's time for us to take a quick break. We will be back in just a few moments with more This Week in Science. I've got cats coming up in the second half. Stay tuned. Thank you for listening to TWIS. You are the reason we are able to do what we do every week, bringing you up to date and down to earth news and views on science discoveries. And with your help, we can do even more together. We can bring a sane perspective to a world full of misinformation. Head to twist.org right now, click on the Patreon link, and choose your level of support. Be a part of bringing sanity and science to more people. We can't do it without you.
And we're back. You're listening to This Week in Science.
Yes, we are back. It is time now for that segment that we want to fill with all of your emails and stories. And this week we have a What Has Science Done For Me Lately from a minion, Brody Pomper. Greetings, TWIS humans. I am a greenhouse manager growing grasses, herbaceous, perennials, and bamboo for the wholesale ornamental trade. My undergrad education was in plant science and agroecology, and I've become obsessed with plant pathology. I'm studying bioinformatics at the graduate level while working so that I can once again live in a science world, which is my natural habitat. What science has done for me lately is biocontrols. Natural enemies of arthropod pests, beneficial fungi, and bacteria. I learned about this in my undergraduate work in the Penn State research greenhouses, mainly in the form of Encarsia formosa wasps, Ophidius colemanni wasps, and Neosciulus comeric. I can't even say these names. Neosciulus cucumeris mites. There we go. In my current work as a greenhouse manager, I have moved my company away from the heavily chemical-dependent pest management system towards a much less toxic method of keeping our lovely plant babies healthy and beautiful. I get to team up with such beautiful and proud organisms from Ophidius, a parasitoid wasp of aphids, Delosia, a beetle broad-spectrum predator, Stratiolaelaps, a mite that eats fungus gnat larvae, Steinermia, a nematode that kills fungus gnat larvae with a bacterial toxin produced from bacteria inside the nematodes. Oh my gosh, death from within. And that's just the macro mesofaunal creatures. I get to put the Stratio-Lalaps mites out onto the newly potted plants using a leaf blower with a funnel full of mites attached to the barrel. 5-year-old me is so proud of 34-year-old me. I feel like a general deploying troops to my citizens. I also get to team up with wise, tough, and innumerable microbes with beautiful names like glomus, trichoderma, Pisolithus, Rhizopogon, Azospirillum, Pseudomonas, Streptomyces, and Paenobacillus. Some of these creatures parasitize pathogenic fungi. Others make nutrients more available to the plant. Others still competitively exclude the pathogens. It's dazzlingly complex, and there's so many unknowns, just the way I like it. The science involved in this nascent revolution of biological plant protection is amazing, and I'm humbled to benefit from countless careers worth of careful study. I dream of further biocontrols, such as a nematode that kills slugs. There is one available in Europe that's not allowed in North America because it might just kill all of our native gastropods. There is research into yeah, that'd be bad. There is research into finding a good candidate for a North American equivalent. This science has allowed me to go home with less pesticide residue on my skin and in my lungs, and more importantly, less damage to the environment and my coworkers. More broadly, my chosen science has given me purpose and direction in life, and I am told on a near weekly basis by someone that my obvious passion is inspirational. Purposeful living makes me brave, strong, and patient in my daily life. Another thing to pass on to listeners who may be disappointed with their work if they're not using their brain enough for their liking, as was the case for me a while ago, hack a job so that you end up doing what you want to do. I was depressed because I wasn't a capital S scientist doing grad school research because I'm choosing to be a present parent for my teenage daughter, until I just made my job into that of a scientist. I'm addicted to data collection and so have started managing vapor pressure deficit by logging temperature and relative humidity. I run experiments, which makes me excited to go to work and get that data. So within whatever constraints are placed on you, I encourage you to bend and tweak your work until it gives you something rewarding. I love TWIS because you guys have fabulous contextualization and incisive critical thinking, which allows me to better deploy the eyebrow of doubt when encountering popular science press. I'm low-key trying to break into the science communication world myself, mainly in regards to fungi and plant microbe interactions, phytobiomes, and shows like TWIS, In Defense of Plants, Ologies, TWIVO, Journey to the Microcosmos, Crime Pays But Botany Doesn't, The Brain Scoop, and This Podcast Will Kill You, to name just a few, give me zealous assurance that there is a market and hunger out there for the kind of wonky stuff that few people in my personal life want to discuss. Gratefully, Brody Burl Pomper, BS, Plant Science.
Nice.
Yeah. Brody, thank you so much for writing in with this letter. I really enjoyed it. Although, yes, the Latin names of the species were a tongue twister at times, but it was a challenge I rose to. I appreciated it.
It reminded me of a revamp, I think from the 80s, maybe 90s, of The Outer Limits sci-fi show. And one of the episodes, there's this researcher and he's got Martian soil samples, and it turns out there's these little eggs in there, and he grows them up. And then at some point, these little scorpion-like creatures become sort of sentient, and they're evolving before him, and they make he's got them in this large aquarium, and at first they're making these sort of structures, sort of like some ants will make, these sort of elaborate tall structures that they will live in, and then at some point there's an image of him emblazoned on the structure, so they actually, it might not be there yet, but maybe they do appreciate you on a level that you're not aware of yet.
Perhaps they do. Although I am sure the pathogens that you're killing off with your biocontrol do not appreciate it.
It'll just make them stronger.
It'll make them stronger. It's good. If you would like to write in with your own tale of science, with your own ideas about what science has done for you lately, send me an email, Kirsten@thisweekinscience.com. You can leave us a message on our Facebook page. Also, that's facebook.com/thisweekinscience. I want to keep filling this little segment of the show with content from you. So, right. Okay, Justin, why are you so violent?
Did you notice my Cobra Kai shirt that I'm wearing today?
Yeah. Cobra Kai.
Strike hard, no mercy. Yes, this also takes place in the animal kingdom. The snake's poisonous venom, the lion's lacerating claws, wolf's terrible teeth, the owl's lethal talons, the cone snail's deadly harpoon. Nature develops specialized features that can be used as tools or weapons for hunting prey. But there is another evolution of specialized features and body size that tends to show up primarily in males. Things like horns, antlers, tusks, and claws of bulls, rams, walrus, elk, and elephant, as well as oodles of crustaceans and beetles, have features that are meant to do what, Blair? Defend, you're right, defend their mating territory.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
These are features that are used as weapons for mate competition and defense more than anything else. These are evolved weapons and tools that have mostly in male populations that are designed around the conflict of mate competition. But what about humans? Do humans have anything like this? Well, according to new research from the University of Utah, males of the human species have upper bodies that are built for punching.
Yeah, like the karate contest.
Yeah.
There you go.
This is published in the Journal of Experimental Biology. In mammals in general, says Utah professor David Carrier, the difference between males and females is often greatest in the structures that are used as weapons. And for years, Carrier has been exploring the hypothesis that generations of interpersonal male-male aggression long in our past have shaped structures in human bodies to specialize us for fighting one another specifically. Past work has shown that proportions of the hand aren't just for manual dexterity. They potentially also protect the hand when it is formed into a fist. Other studies have looked at the strength of the bones in the face, which were likely the target for such punches. How our heels planted in the ground can confer additional upper body strength. So we've got some sort of leverage that lends to this. One of the predictions that comes out of those, Carrier says, is if we are specialized for punching, you might expect males to be particularly strong in the muscles that are associated with throwing a punch. Now, we already know that human males on average have 75 to 90% more strength than females. The question is, why? Yes.
Yeah.
Researchers measured punching strength of some pretty small sample size, 20 men, 19 women. But they did make, these were all reported as physically active types. So they weren't measuring the punches of couch potatoes. The researchers rigged up a hand crank that would mimic the motion of a punch because they didn't want to injure any of their subjects by actually making them punch things. And they also did a measurement of arm pulling strength of a lion forward over their head because they wanted to also test an alternative hypothesis that the upper body strength of males may have developed out of throwing spears or hurtling objects.
What about just for work in general?
Yeah, so that's totally possible. What's the one thing that we have seen over and over and over again through hominin history, even before, well before, millions of years before the current modern human, was axe tools. These stone axe tools that we would use for carving things. Absolutely. But again,
and not just axe tools for carving, but we've also seen in in modern tribal cultures, we see a division of labor very often, that the men go do the hunting and the women stay around the camp or the settlement and raise the children and fix the food. And there seems to be a division of labor in terms of the things that would require strength. But then again, is it cause or effect?
Mm-hmm. And that's true of current modern humans, but the dominant for the hominin for, the 500,000 years before us that was hunting was male and female. Neanderthals were a mixed group. I think a lot of early human hunting, current modern human hunting, involved this practice. I can't remember exactly what the name of it was, but it's because we could sweat. We could just keep chasing and irritating an animal and running after it until it passed out from heat exhaustion. And then we had something that couldn't get up very well that we could kill.
I got you down, and now I will get you.
Yeah. So we weren't really. It looks like we didn't develop this strength from throwing things, though, based on the difference here. Because what they found was there wasn't a whole lot of difference between men and women in sort of magnifying their physical power by throwing things, or the overhead pull test. However, during the punch motion, males' average power was 162% greater than females, and the least powerful male in their group was still stronger than the most powerful woman in terms of punching things. So a very distinct thing between the genders, but less so when it came to the throwing of things.
Carrie, I have one issue with this, though, and that is that punching is actually really bad for your hands.
Yeah,
punching breaks your fingers if you do it a lot or too hard.
Yes, and so that was one of the things that they had discovered, is that the way that human hand is designed, there's considerably less damage done to the hand in a fist than perhaps if it was designed in a different way, or if it was if you were comparing it maybe to a primate. But anyway, the sort of summary here is that it is quite potential. If we look at the human from a purely anthropological, we step back and we just look at humans as another animal, as part of it, then you can devise, as we do when we look at animals that have really strange horny formations in their faces, and they, or big claws that they use to whack each other with when fighting over mates. And we say that these are features that evolved out of mate competition. It's quite possible you could look at the human animal and say that the chances are that for maybe millions of years, males have been punching each other in the face over women.
I do like this. The one thing that this brings back is we've talked about the other side of this story, which is the study of the human jaw. And the original question was whether or not the male jaw specifically, had evolved to take a punch. And I think that was one of the first questions. And so I find it interesting that now they're starting to look at the other side of it, which is the actual throwing the punch.
Yeah, and there's a great history of watching people punch each other in the face, basically, from boxing to MMA. It's not something I've ever been really particularly drawn to, but it is garners a phenomenal amount of attention from people wanting to see two men walk into a ring and punch each other in the face over and over again. And it may harken back to a long ancestry of having done this for mate competition. So maybe part of the excitement of watching somebody punch somebody else in the face until they fall down is that part of your brain is going, ooh, they get the mate. Oh, well done. Well, way to survive. Way to complete your biological task. It may be just that simple. It might not have anything to do with regular violence as we may perceive it.
Yeah. Yep. Might not be regular. Could be more sporadic. Yeah.
Or perhaps all violence stems from that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that would be a far. I think there's a difference between mate
Might be time to
competition,
look
and
at
then
the brains is
and
all
just
I have to say
violence.
about that. Look at the brains.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend
you
it. I'm
know-
not saying that we should all be go around punching each other in the face. Please don't get me wrong. I don't think people should have this as part of a mating ceremony. Although, really, like, do you take so and so to be your wife? Yeah, I do, and then they both turn around and punch the priest. I think that would be kind of like, hearkening back to the old ways. But no, I think being civilized is probably a better way.
It's a better way. It's a better way being civilized. But something that happens often is that we make assumptions about the way things work.
Yes.
And then we actually go to look at it, and the science, the research, because we're looking at it in a way that just our eyes wouldn't normally perceive, our brains wouldn't normally perceive. It allows us to see that, oh, wow, our assumptions are totally wrong and things don't work that way. This is what happened in a study published in Science Advances this week. Researchers from the University of California, Davis, go Davis.
Davis.
Yeah, we're studying bumblebees. They're looking at bumblebees, those oxen of the bee world, carrying their nectar loads around. And they said, oh, look at these bumblebees. They can carry lots of nectar. And hey, if you are a bee and you've got more nectar, it would make sense that the more nectar you have, the harder you're going to beat your wings and pump your wings to be able to carry that load. And they assumed that the beating of the bee wings would become less efficient over time. And so these researchers, Susan Gagliardi in the College of Biological Sciences and Professor Stacy Combs from the Department of Neurobiology, Physiology, and Behavior, they emptied out snow globes so that they could put bees in them and measure the effort that the bees went through to fly with a variety of loads. They soldered small pieces of wire to the bees to be able to change the weight of the bee, and then took video of them flying around. And they found that these bees, as they were flying, that they did change their wing beat pattern. They did start beating their wings more strongly. And the bee wing beat also has a little kind of figure 8 dipping action in it. The wings kind of scoop forward and scoop back. And so the bee is working to lift air underneath. And I think Blair's talked about the dynamics of insect flight previously. But instead of becoming less efficient with more weight, they became more efficient. But they haven't been able to discover what the bees are doing, because all they're seeing the bees do so far is beat their wings at a higher frequency and maybe a little harder. But they don't understand how the efficiency of carrying heavier weights is increasing. It's a mystery.
Well, you know what that reminds me of is that humans, when we jog, we bop up and down, right? And we actually waste a lot of energy. It's very inefficient. But when we run, there's a lot less energy lost with up and down motion. It's a lot more smooth. And so it kind of sounds almost like that to me. The fact that they're working harder and faster allows for less vertical movement and less vertical energy lost, potentially, the way that they're moving the wings.
And what I could also
That's
say
really
is
interesting
that,
insight, Blair. Yeah.
Yeah. And with that, following that logic, then running would be a thing that running is for, right? As opposed to jogging, which isn't really the thing that it's for. It's an in-between, but it's maybe not what we've developed as a skill set in chasing down things across the ages. Yeah, so maybe
take a jog.
The normal design for a bee is to be carrying something, and so then maybe that's their more efficient place with that. That a lot of that flight is geared around being able to do. But yeah, hypotheses are tough. You got to walk in with one. You got to identify what you're going for. but you can't prove anything with one. You can just disprove stuff. So their hypothesis, they can disprove it, but it doesn't actually prove anything, even if they get the result that matches it. They still, they still have all their work ahead of them.
Other things to get rid of. But the one thing they have been able to take away from this is that they know that if we are going to run that analogy of jogging versus running, that the bees are making a choice to jog or run when they're carrying different sized loads. And the bees can switch between these modes at will. And they say that they one day, the same bee on a different day is going to pick a new way to flap its wings. That the bees are actually not completely consistent in the way they do this, but they have this efficient mode. And maybe it is like jogging or running. And one day you jog with the heavy load because, oh my God. And then another day you're feeling more peppy because you slept really well and you're like, I'm running. Look at me run. I carry it. Anyway. Could be.
I would think they would always go faster when they had the heavy thing because they're like, I just want to drop this off.
I know. Let me get there.
Get it over with.
Yeah. Yeah. But they have a dynamic choice. This is bees choosing whether to jog or to run. And we don't know how they change that manner. Yeah.
I don't know if it's choosing. The way I kind of pictured it would be like I somehow pictured it like a vehicle that's designed to carry weight, like a big rig truck that's designed to carry like a heavy load. And if that vehicle is going down the road with no load, it's not as efficient. It may be harder to steer. It may be, but once it's got the load that it was designed to really operate at full speed, it's completely solid on the road. So it could be that, part of this optimization of the design with the additional weight is so that the bee, once it finds something to bring back to the hive worth bringing back, is really good at it. And the rest of the time it can fly like a bumblebee because who cares? There's nothing important going on yet.
Yeah, it's got an overdrive setting or whatever you can go into. Go into hyperdrive.
Pump the nitrous.
It's got a hall mode with a longer first gear. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. There was another bee story this week, which a couple of people did send me, published in Science this last week. There are researchers who are not on the physiology side of the bees with how they fly, but they are engineering bees' microbiomes to produce a chemical that causes mites and the virus that causes varroa mites and the virus that causes colony collapse disorder to self-destruct. Yeah. So Cornell University toxicologist Jeffrey Scott said that it's kind of like a customized medicine for honeybees. So they've picked a bacterial species, Snodgrassella alvi, and put it to work with some extra genetic code. And they have been able, they're using RNA interference to produce these molecules that disrupt communication within the cells and then lead to this self-destruction of the viruses and the mites themselves, and this is good potentially for colony collapse disorder.
Probiotics for bees.
It is kind of, but yeah, it's an interesting probiotic because it's genetically engineered and it's directly targeting these the cause of colony collapse disorder. But this is very, very, very far away from actually being applied to commercial hives. They've only looked at groups of 20 bees of similar ages for only a couple of weeks. And so they're not even getting close to what a normal hive would, how big a normal hive would be. But, anything positive to help us save the bees. It would be amazing.
They're important.
Very important. Justin, would you like to tell us another story?
I've got a coronavirus update. As of the time of this episode, or at least it was written, there were 28,000.
We need a sound drop for this one.
A sound drop?
Yeah, like a theme, like a coronavirus
Okay, I got it.
update.
This just in.
There you go.
Hi. At the time of this episode, there are 28,078 confirmed cases of the coronavirus. Specifically what is it? The COVID. What are we calling it?
nCoV.
nCoV.
2019 nCoV. N stands
2019.
for novel, and CoV stands for coronavirus.
2019 nCoV.
But they're going to rename it.
I think at some point they really should. I think they're waiting to find out what it comes from, right?
They're when they find out what it comes from, but there's also an effort in play right now, and we could be getting a new name within days.
Ooh.
So.
SARS-2, the sequel? No.
Wildlife market.
Sorry, is
Related.
that insensitive?
Maybe.
I think the wildlife market virus should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give us your update, Justin.
So 28,078 confirmed cases with 564 reported deaths. And despite this rapid rise in the cases, the mortality rate remains at about 2% overall, though it is much lower outside of China. Additionally, the pneumonia deaths associated with the virus are occurring among older individuals at rates similar to seasonal flu, which either makes it not such a big deal or makes the regular seasonal flu a major health crisis, depending on your age. While China remains the most affected nation, cases have been found in just about every developed nation. I think 26 plus countries now have cases identified. The sort of major concern there, though, is the lack of cases in anywhere in Africa, anywhere in South America, and only 2 cases in Russia, which sounds like underreporting or missed cases. Concerning also because it means that if there are cases in these regions that are going unreported, despite the efforts that take place elsewhere to create quarantine, you may be creating human reservoirs. It's hard to believe that nowhere in Africa or South America is there a single case of this.
Right. And it's hard to believe, like you said, that there's only 2 in Russia.
Yeah.
All of Russia. Yeah.
Yeah. Although my instinct would tell me that Russia is doing its own monitoring, but not cooperating with reporting, whereas other places just may not have had the infrastructure to react quickly enough to differentiate this from a regular flu.
Yeah, that is the absolute, the truth. And most likely in Africa, that's what we're dealing with, is they don't have tests to be able to differentiate it.
Okay, so interestingly though, this last week we've had the seriousness both being taken very serious, the outbreak being taken very serious, and being played down considerably in China, which is suffering financial losses while struggling to contain the outbreak. Apparently, 62 airlines have canceled services and flights to China at this point.
Mm-hmm.
This week found China's foreign ministry spokeswoman pointing fingers at the United States and other countries for overreacting to stating that the U.S. had inappropriately overreacted by issuing negative travel advisory statements and stating the United States hasn't provided assistance, despite being the first to impose a travel ban on Chinese travelers, and that this was only to create and spread fear. Meanwhile, 11 million people within the Chinese city of Wuhan remained locked down on quarantine for a second week without significant services being provided to them. While the foreign ministry spokeswoman regularly gives in-person public statements and responds probably to pre-written questions from the not-so-free press, the current information releases have all been done by streaming video. So no more going out in person and in public and delivering these messages. And I can see, the numbers actually got a little bit higher since, as we're now showing 28,280 confirmed cases, 565 deaths. What's also interesting is the total number of patients that have recovered was about similar a week ago to the number of deaths and is now doubling the number of deaths. So the expectation is if these trends continue, we're still looking at something that is as lethal and is recoverable as a regular seasonal flu. However,
It's
it
still
is novel.
hundreds of thousands of people around the world. Yeah.
Well, and actually, this is a tiny number compared to what happens in a regular seasonal flu, where 35 million people in the United States alone get it, and many tens of thousands die from it, and it tends to affect elderly people.
Well, but
who may
we have a
compromised
flu
immune
shot
system.
that
Yes.
sometimes can be effective against that, and we do not currently have a coronavirus
No, we
vaccine.
do not.
Don't have a vaccine,
So-
but what's also interesting is that we are dealing with something that we know has crossed at least one, if not two, species in its mutations and its ability to cross infect animals. So what we don't know is what else can this jump to. For instance, if it can jump from human to human, if it's come from a different mammal into humans, can it go to your cat? Can it go to your dog? Can it also find another reservoir post-human? And can it mutate within humans to become more or less deadly? So
Right.
the fact that we have very little information in that category makes this pandemic worth not panicking, but being very, very serious about. And again, even if
Because
it
we know
turns out
little about it. Yeah.
yeah, and even if it turns out to never become more lethal and the family pets are safe from this and everything else, it's a good test run. We should be practicing at containment in case this was a more lethal or strain of a virus that was causing more damage.
Yeah.
So-
And
And
to
it's
your
the kind
point,
of thing. Oh,
Yeah,
go
go
ahead, Blair.
well, the graph on the screen here in the lower right is actually, I think, exactly what you want to see in a situation like this. It's very frustrating that there's exponential growth within China, but that the growth of number of cases outside of mainland China is pretty much a flat line. There are not a lot of new cases popping up around the globe. Some of that might have to do with reporting, true, but if we are able to better contain this, it won't blow to the worldwide proportions that SARS did in the past. And I think that this is a good kind of show of how things have adjusted since then.
So it's already well past SARS. It's well past that number in terms of people who have it. Now the deaths are still lower because it's not as lethal. Which also,
I thought it had not spread as evenly across, though, that it was more localized.
that's
in terms of
totally
and you
possible.
can see that. Yeah.
That's totally possible. It's also very possible that the current spike in numbers it may continue partly within China, partly because there is a lot of talk about when it was initially reported as having been discovered may not have been actually the time point at which it was actually discovered, and it may have been going on a little bit, if not a lot longer, which also would help to explain why it has reached such a large population, if not much larger than what we're seeing reported within China. So,
and even outside of China, even though like you mentioned earlier, even though countries are reporting it, there is still a limitation in health services' ability to diagnose this particular virus versus the flu or versus other symptoms that that are very similar. And so the diagnostic ability and then putting it on the tally is difficult. However, that's the way it's working. The thing that I find very interesting about this is it's also very visibly beginning to affect not just China economically, but the global supply, where Airbus has shut down a plant in China because of the virus. We have car parts that are not being manufactured because of the quarantine and the shutdown. And so car companies like Toyota and others are potentially going to be unable to fulfill orders of their vehicles as a result of the slowdown in the parts. We also, in terms of medical materials themselves, are going to see a slowdown. The majority of surgical masks and other items are produced in China, and so they're staying there to help the population there, number one, but they're also not being manufactured at the rate that they potentially were before because people are sick and things are shutting down. So there is there is a change in availability of things. And I'm just saying, in terms of the global scale, it's just a real reminder that yes, a country may be hit, and I don't know. This is a political thing, but you know, we all need to pitch in. Every country needs to pitch in when something like this happens and it affects a country.
And there's a little bit of a vicious cycle here, too, in that this is exactly why a nation like China, with a state-run media and everything else, might want to suppress the information from coming out because they've seen before how they can be negatively impacted financially. Yeah, and so it becomes part of the problem that we are so interconnected as well.
Yeah. Well, it is ongoing, and I mean, I think at this point, it's like you said, it's something that we don't necessarily need to panic about, but it's something to keep an eye on. And, you know, researchers are working to figure out more about it, and they are looking at the spike proteins to determine whether there is something that is already on our hospital shelves that can be used as a treatment to determine what it actually targets in the cells to gain entry. At this point, it looks as though it may target the same key protein as SARS. And if it did, there may be treatments that were developed for SARS that can be used against this particular virus. So there's a lot of avenues to go down, but there's still a lot to be learned.
And the one lesson that you can take away from this too, if you are over the age of 60 years old, is treat this like the regular seasonal flu, as if you had not been vaccinated. Avoid young people, avoid middle-aged people, avoid people. Become a germaphobe. Become a public germaphobe.
Yeah.
Because it's you that this is after.
Wash your hands and avoid people.
Don't go for a power walk through the international airport. You'll be fine.
Wait, what are we doing this week?
I know.
Walking.
I did in fact see on that map there is one confirmed case in Seattle, but
it was the first. It was the first, wasn't it? In the United States. Yeah.
In the U.S. Yes. Oh, speaking of things that make you feel funny, allergies, those itchy eyes, the runny nose. Sometimes it gets more serious. It can affect your breathing. Some people end up in the hospital as a result of allergies. But there's a study that came out this last week that has my brain spinning as to the idea of whether or not some animals have hijacked allergies and the allergic response of their predators to use it as a defense.
Interesting.
Trying to get their predators sneezing.
Yeah,
exactly.
No matter how well they can hide, right? No matter how well camouflaged they are,
they could just stop sneezing.
There you are. There you are, my friend.
Researchers at the University of Queensland have published on their work looking at a protein from the venom of the slow lories. Yes. They compared it to a protein called FeLD1, which is a protein in cat dander. And these two molecules have a lot of surprising structural and potentially functional similarities, even though they evolved so far apart. And going through the chemistry, the structural molecular makeup of these proteins from an evolutionary perspective, the researchers say, despite these slow lories, despite being a mystery to science, they're commonly smuggled from the wild and sold in the pet trade. So our rescue center research was a perfect opportunity to do some good in a bad situation. And generally, slow lories use their venom to fight with other slow lories, causing very slow to heal wounds. But when humans are bitten, the victims display symptoms as if they're going into allergic shock. And they studied this in the lab, comparing it to the allergic protein in cats. And they said this is amazing. Their theory is that since this protein is being used as a defensive weapon in slow lories, it makes sense that cats may be using the allergen as a defensive weapon as well. The fact that so many people are allergic to cats might not be a coincidence. This may have been an evolutionarily selected for trait in the wild as a defense against predators. And this ability to trigger allergy as a weapon might not be something restricted to slow lories, but to have separately evolved. And these proteins, they're looking to test this hypothesis and these proteins more in the future. But in the meantime, what they are looking at is for zookeepers and animal handlers who are potentially bitten by slow lories, and the venom affects the slow lories, that they could potentially use cat allergy medications to help stop their allergic response to the venom.
Crazy.
That the venom might actually be treatable with allergy medication.
So a lot of these guys that are rescued and put in zoos actually have been have had their some of their teeth removed so that they cannot bite. So that's one of the really sad things about the pet trade for these guys, is that that's one of the steps. So when rescue individuals end up in zoos, sometimes they don't even have the ability to bite and inject venom anymore, which is pretty interesting. I have not seen many zoos with lorises in them. So
No. Well, Wouldn't
it be also like, I'm trying to picture like the idea that humans as a predator were targeted with this. Wouldn't it be the other way around? Wouldn't humans become allergic to cats as sort of like a pre-warning to avoid certain areas?
To avoid them, maybe.
Well, then that wouldn't be an allergy, would it? It would be a reaction, which is the whole allergy thing is that the histamines are kind of overreacting, right?
Okay,
so,
but think of this now. Go way back in the back of the back machine.
Yeah.
And it's just there or it's not selectively. Now, those who are not allergic to cats don't even notice that this cave has a certain affect. And they think, this looks like a perfectly reasonable place to sleep tonight. And others with who get this immune response, negative thing, sure. But they're like, I can't breathe. Like this cave, there's something wrong. It's haunted. I don't care. I'm out. But they don't get eaten by the lion. So then it persists for more and more generations.
Yes. That's interesting.
I see your thinking. Mm-hmm. Yes. And now they are our little allergen-bearing beasts.
Yeah, they're still the enemy, but whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. But, if there's a way, if these animals, like you said, if there's a way to counteract the allergenic potential of the slow lory's venom, then, maybe fewer slow lories will end up losing their teeth. Maybe more will be allowed to keep their teeth. Maybe there'll be a way to stop that practice in the future.
Yeah. And just in general, don't get an animal as a pet that's not a pet.
Right.
A lot of them come straight out of the wild. They are not born in captivity. And then all sorts of crazy stuff happens to them as a result because they don't make a good pet.
They don't make a good pet. But I think the take-home message here, though, also is that very interesting question. Is there a possibility that allergies have been hijacked as a defensive mechanism?
But then I can't help but wonder, why? I mean, we could talk about this forever, but why do they still exist in cats if cats have domesticated us, which is the new theory, right? Is that we didn't domesticate cats. Cats domesticated us into taking care of them. Why wouldn't evolutionarily they want to lose
the dander?
The dander.
Yeah, to become
perhaps
even
they
more.
will. It's only been 30, 50,
Yeah.
80,000 years.
there
We don't
is-
know yet. So
And there is the
No,
aspect-
I don't think it's been that long.
That hasn't been that long. No. With humans, no, it's been several thousand years.
I would
but
put
not
4 or
tens.
5,
Yeah.
5,000 years tops, I would say, with cats. It's
Maybe
not a really
25.
handy creature
Anyway.
to have around. It really is, because it offers no
Sure
benefit.
it is.
It's not a working animal.
Purring, cuddling, soft laps.
Farm cat.
it's
Oh, no,
nice.
none of those things. We've adapted to become familiar with it. Those are horrible sounds.
Terrible.
Those are the sounds of a predator about to eat you normally.
But the other side of it is we know that desensitization to the allergens can work. So individuals who have cats and have a cat allergy can become desensitized to their own cat's dander while still remaining allergic to a strange cat's dander. So desensitization can be part of the picture. So you have a certain cat that hangs out with you all the time, comes to your farm, maybe lets you touch it, hangs out, sleeps on a blanket, you eat enough of its fur that you're fine with it hanging out a bit and your nose doesn't sniffle as much as it does for other animals. Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Cat allergies. It's not just a sniffle, though. It's like the tongue swells up.
It
Like, people,
depends
like,
on
varying
the
levels.
severity
Choke.
Yeah.
and the person.
It depends.
Yeah, it depends.
Just like with any other allergy.
I just get very irritated around cats. Is that an allergy?
That
It's
is
not an allergy.
This is a
I think they're
known.
psychotic.
This
I
is-
just think they're psychotic. And they freak me out. Like, there's a psychopathic killer in the room with me right now, and nobody seems freaked out by this but me.
Yep, that's just you, Justin. This is This Week in Science, and if you want to help TWIS to grow, get a friend to subscribe today. That would be awesome. Are we ready for some quick science stories?
Yeah.
Quick science, quick science. How about some people yarn?
What?
Tell you a
I made up
yarn. Okay, this one is a little wild. Researchers looking at the extracellular matrix of cells. So this is like collagen. It's the fibers and proteins in between the cells, the thing that kind of holds the basement membrane of your cells together for your skin. Extracellular matrix, very important for supporting your cells. These researchers, they were able to grow extracellular matrix into these sheets. And I was like, oh, look, we've got extracellular matrix sheets. That's great. But what are we going to do with them? So they cut them up into little strips and used textile manufacturing techniques to treat them like yarn and basically make people thread. And this people thread can be used to close sutures, to put graft into wounds that require a little scaffolding and support to help the cells along the way. And that can be tied in lots of pretty knots, but it won't be rejected by your body because it's people yarn.
You know, the first thing I thought of when you picked up this picture is vaginal mesh, which is something that there's all sorts of medical issues with.
Oh,
You could make cellular vaginal mesh. That's fascinating.
that was
That
not
sweater.
the first thing I thought of, but
Sorry, I don't know why.
Is
Probably
that,
the way
sweater,
you're
is that
watching.
sweater you're wearing? Is that alpaca? No,
Yeah.
it's vaginal mesh.
It's vaginal mesh. So I think it's because
people yarn.
I used to watch like game shows during the middle of the day when I worked during weekends, so I would get weekdays off, and they would always have the like, "Did you have a vaginal mesh surgery that went wrong?" kind of commercials a
Oh, no.
lot because
Oh,
there's a
right.
lot of complications with those surgeries.
Maybe this could solve those problems.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, instead of thread, instead of staples, we've got these plastics and we've got these polymers, but now we have stuff textiles made out of people. Well, the stuff between the cells of people. Yeah. Human textiles. I think this is super cool. And then my last story is updating everyone on the question of whether or not red meat is bad for you. A new paper has been published in the JAMA journal of the JAMA Internal Medicine Journal, the Journal of the American Medical Association, looking at a cohort of 2,682 U.S. adults from 6 prospective cohort studies. That means this is a meta-analysis looking at the intake of meat, unprocessed red meat, poultry, and fish, and comparing it with incident cardiovascular disease or all-death mortality. And dun, 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 if you eat red meat, you're more likely to have a heart attack and die. That's pretty much.
Although technically, is it the red meat or is it the fat?
Linked. It might be the fat. Who knows?
The
but
lipids.
They did find that every meat except for fish, so red meat, unprocessed red meat, and poultry, all were associated with higher incident of cardiovascular disease. Poultry too, which was surprising.
Fried chicken. Yeah, you
Could
eat
be
a
the fried chicken.
That's probably, yeah.
And fish was the only one not associated. However, all-cause mortality, chicken and fish were lumped together, and red meat was on the bad side. So the researchers pretty much say if you're gonna eat meat, you're taking your life in your hands. No, that's not what they say, but meat consumption is definitely something that actually one of the researchers says that eating meat at any level is not really safe. 2 red meat or poultry servings a week were linked to premature death and heart disease. So, fish it is.
I have a quick story that I didn't bring.
Okay.
They found evidence of Neanderthal DNA in African populations. But it's exciting, but then it also turns out that they think it came from European backwash. Yeah. Basically, current modern humans who left Africa, settled into Middle East and Europe, interbred with Neanderthals, and then at some point later, some of those descendants came back, migrated back to Africa, and that's why the signal is there. So, not ancient Neanderthals of Africa, and that's why I didn't bring the story. But it's quick.
It's not. It's not. It's a Eurasian
really
backwash.
Still really interesting, but yeah.
Very.
Real quick, you want to hear about spider glue?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We never got to the spider glue story.
Yeah.
Spider glue.
Moth wings, one of the great things about moth wings is since they're fuzzy and they're covered in tiny scales that slough off as you touch them, it's really easy for them to escape spider webs. But there's a type of orb weaver spider called the Sirtarachne akiri.
Say that again.
That lives in rice paddies in Japan, and they actually make their webs horizontally and have these silks that dangle down, and they're drenched in a special glue that forms globules that look like beads on a string. You can see them with the naked eye. Sounds beautiful. They have a special glue on them that only works in humid conditions. And it allows for the glue droplets to actually go through the capillaries and underneath these little scales of the moth wings and actually dissolve and solidify all of these scales and other matter on the wings to kind of make an extra thick, sturdy glue. So they use this defense mechanism against the moths.
Wait, it's using a chemical reaction within the moth's wing itself?
Yes.
Oh, that's
So
some
it
next
moves,
level stuff right there.
So it moves through the capillaries and also interacts with the water in the scales to kind of liquefy them and re-solidify. And so it's just a fascinating way of getting around this defense mechanism, but it also is a water-dependent glue, kind of like super glue, actually, that has an amazing opportunity for application for human use.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
Let's follow the glue. Yes. It'll stick. Let's follow the glue.
Globules.
Globules. That's one of those great
Globules.
words.
Nice word.
Wanna
Also,
say that
slough,
word.
slough,
Sloughing.
Sloughing.
Is it sloughing on?
slough.
Soggy sloughing.
Globule.
Soggy sloughing globules.
Globule kind of sticks you in an oozy way too when you try to say it.
Globule. We've done it.
We've done it.
Yeah, we came to another end of another episode. Wow.
Globule. We've done it.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, share it with a friend. I'd love to say thank you to Fada for your help with social media and show notes. Gord for manning the chat room. Thank you so much. ID4, who's not here tonight, but for usually recording the shows. We've got audio, and I want to thank our Patreon sponsors and the Burroughs Welcome Fund for their generous support. Thank you to Paul Disney, Stu Pollock, Ed Dyer, Andrew Swanson, Craig Landon, Ed, Philip Shane, Ken Hayes, Charlene Henry, Joshua Fury, Steve DeBell, Alex Wilson, Tony Steele, Richard Porter, Mark Mazzaros, Bob Calder, Jack, Matthew Litwin, Jason Roberts, Bill K, Eric Knapp, Richard, Brian Condren, Dave Neighbor, Ben Bignell, Justin Taylor, P.S., Josiah Zahner, Howard Tan, Donald Mundis, Sarah Forfar, Dan K, Matt Base, Darwin Hannon, Project Pecoraro, Gene Tellier, John Gridley, Corinne Benton, Adam LaJoy, Sarah Chavis, Rodney Lewis, Tiffany Boyd, Mountain Sloth, Seth Gradney, Stephen Alberon, Rat John Asami, Dave Friedel, Daryl Myshak, Paul Ronovich, Sue Doster, Dave Wilkinson, Noodles, Kevin Reardon, Christoph Zuknarek, Ashish Pants, Ulysses Adkins, Artyom, Rick Ramus, Paul John McKee, Jason Olds, Brian Carrington, Christopher Dreyer, Lucis Lazuski, Jim Drapeau, Greg Riley, Sean Lamb, Steve Leisman, Kurt Larson, Rudy Garcia, Marjorie, Gary S., Robert Greg Briggs, Brendan Minish, Christopher Rappin, Flying Out, Aaron Luthen, Matt Sutter, Mark Hessenflow, Kevin Parachan, Byron Lee, E.O. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon.
I'm a seal. Clapping.
I can make your hands clap. If you are interested in supporting us, you can find information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience. On next week's show, remember, there will be no live Wednesday broadcast, but tune in to twist.org/live on Friday, the 14th at 12:30 p.m. and it's Saturday, the 15th at 11:30 a.m. for our live shows at the AAAS annual meeting in Seattle, Washington.
Yes, these shows will also be published as podcast episodes. Just Google This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. And if you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and the links to the stories we talked about will be available on our website. You can go there, www.twist.org. You can look up how to spell globule and look at videos of seals clapping. When you're there, you can also sign up for our newsletter, which we'll definitely be sending one out after AAAS to tell you about our experience at the conference.
Nice. And if you want to contact us directly, email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, which is TWIS, somewhere in the subject line. Otherwise, your email will be spam filtered into oblivion. You can also hit us up on the Twitter where we are at Twist Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week on Friday and Saturday. And we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say, and if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.